Adanna was unlike any other woman in the village. She was a striking beauty with big expressive eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the world. Her laughter was infectious, and her sense of humor drew many to her stall at the bustling market. Adanna made her living selling goods at the market. Her stall was always the most vibrant, adorned with colorful fabrics, beads, and handcrafted items. Her captivating sense of humor and warm demeanor attracted many customers, who often found themselves lingering at her stall longer than necessary, just to bask in her infectious energy. Yet, there was more to Adanna's reputation than her market charm. She was known throughout the village as the woman who always ruined relationships. Men came and went from her modest thatched house, and whispers followed her wherever she went. In a village where women were expected to conform to certain norms, Adanna's lifestyle was a stark contrast. She lived freely, with men frequently seen walking in and out of her house. Adanna was notorious for her promiscuity, a subject of endless gossip among the villagers. Adanna did not keep one man but had many boyfriends, none of whom stayed for long. She seemed to have a different man in her house every night, and no one really knew who she was dating at any given time. In the evenings, the silhouette of a different man could be seen entering her house, only to leave before dawn. These men varied widely: young bachelors, married men, even travelers passing through the village. The sight of a man leaving her house in the early morning hours was so common that it barely raised an eyebrow anymore. Some of the men would leave looking disheveled, their faces a mix of satisfaction and bewilderment, while others seemed to sneak out with a sense of urgency, hoping not to be seen. Adanna never formed any lasting relationships. When asked about her numerous suitors, she would laugh and brush off the questions with a witty remark, never revealing much about her personal life. Despite her frequent companions, she maintained an air of independence, never allowing any man to claim her as his own. She would tell curious women that she enjoyed her freedom too much to be tied down, that life was too short to live by anyone else's rules. This lifestyle baffled and scandalized the village women, who adhered strictly to the traditional norms of fidelity and modesty. They often whispered among themselves about Adanna's ways, warning their daughters to stay away from her influence. The elders would shake their heads in disapproval, declaring that no good could come from such behavior. The men, on the other hand, were both intrigued and intimidated by her. They admired her beauty and wit but were wary of becoming another fleeting figure in her life. Stories of Adanna's charm and independence spread, making her a figure of both allure and caution. Adanna's promiscuity was a stark contrast to the expectations of women in Umuofia. While other women sought to build stable homes and raise families, Adanna seemed content with her transient relationships and her life as an independent market woman. This made her both a figure of fascination and a subject of derision in the village, a woman who defied the norms and lived life on her own terms. This did not please anyone in the village, and everyone judged her. Her house, a simple structure with a thatched roof and clay walls, stood out due to the constant stream of visitors. Neighbors would often peek through their windows, trying to catch a glimpse of the latest man who had caught Adanna's fancy. Children would gossip and speculate about the mysterious woman and her nightly visitors, adding to the mystique that surrounded her. Despite the rumors and the judgmental glances, Adanna remained unbothered. She carried herself with a confidence that few could muster, her head held high as she walked through the village. Her presence at the market was always a breath of fresh air, her laughter ringing out amidst the humdrum of daily life. For Adanna, life was to be lived fully, without regret or apology. One sunny afternoon, a man named Chima came to the market. Chima was a handsome young man with a kind heart and a gentle smile. He was immediately drawn to Adanna's stall, captivated by her lively personality. As he approached, Adanna flashed him a radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire market. "Good day, my brother. What can I do for you today?" She greeted him with a twinkle in her eye. Chima chuckled, feeling an inexplicable warmth spread through him. "Good day, Adanna. I've heard about your famous market stall. I'm looking for some fabric for my mother." Adanna quickly found the perfect fabric for Chima, all the while making him laugh with her witty remarks. Chima was enchanted by her, but he could also sense a deep sadness behind her smiles. Despite the warnings he had heard about her, Chima felt compelled to get to know her better. Over time, Chima and Adanna developed a friendship. He would visit her stall regularly, and they would chat and laugh for hours. They shared stories, and Adanna's witty banter always brought a smile to Chima's face. She had a way of making the mundane seem magical, and her infectious laughter was a balm to Chima's soul. The villagers, however, were not pleased with this growing friendship. Elderly women would pull Chima aside and whisper stern warnings into his ear. "Stay away from that woman, Chima. She is trouble. She will ruin your life as she has ruined others." Men of the village would pat him on the back, shaking their heads. "Adanna is not wife material, Chima. She lives a life of loose morals. You deserve better." Chima tried to heed these warnings. He would tell himself to stay away, to not visit Adanna's stall. He managed to avoid her for a day, maybe two, but the pull was too strong. Adanna's sense of humor and the way she made him laugh was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Her laughter was a melody that played in his mind, drawing him back to her stall again and again. As their friendship deepened, Chima began to notice the inconsistencies in Adanna's behavior. She was always lively and engaging at her stall during the day, but he knew that at night, her house saw a different side of her. Men would come and go under the cover of darkness, and Chima couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy and confusion. One afternoon, after a particularly amusing conversation with Adanna, Chima saw a man who had left her house early that morning approach her stall. Adanna greeted the man as if he were any other customer, her demeanor unchanged. Chima watched, puzzled, as she laughed and joked with the man, showing no sign that he had been in her house the previous night. Chima's intrigue grew. He began to wonder what drove Adanna to live such a life. Despite her cheerful exterior, there were moments when he caught a glimpse of something deeper in her eyes, a shadow of pain and sadness that no amount of laughter could hide. One evening, Chima mustered the courage to ask Adanna about her life. They were sitting under a large tree, the evening breeze rustling its leaves. The market had closed, and the village was settling down for the night. "Adanna, can I ask you something?" Chima began, his voice gentle. Adanna turned to him, her eyes curious. "Of course, Chima. What is it? Why do you live the way you do? Why do you have so many men coming and going from your house?" Chima asked, his voice soft but insistent. Adanna's expression changed, her smile fading. She looked away, her eyes fixed on the horizon. For a moment, Chima thought she wouldn't answer. Then, she sighed deeply and spoke, her voice tinged with a sadness he had never heard before. "Chima, everyone has their reasons for the way they live their lives. Some of us are just trying to survive the best way we know how," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Chima reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I want to understand, Adanna. I see the pain in your eyes. I want to help." Adanna looked at him, her eyes searching his for any sign of judgment. Finding none, she smiled weakly. "You're a good man, Chima, but there are some things that are too painful to talk about. Maybe someday, I'll tell you." Chima nodded, respecting her need for privacy, but his resolve to help her only grew stronger. He continued to visit her, offering his friendship and support. He was patient, knowing that healing took time and that Adanna's wounds ran deep. As weeks turned into months, Chima's affection for Adanna deepened. He found himself thinking about her constantly, even when he wasn't at the market. He was captivated by her spirit, her strength, and her ability to find joy despite the sorrow that lurked beneath the surface. He began to realize that he was falling in love with her, despite the warnings and the rumors. One evening, Chima decided to visit Adanna at her house. He had never been there at night, and he was curious to see this side of her life. He approached her house cautiously, the moon casting long shadows on the ground. As he neared, he heard the sound of muffled crying. His heart sank. Chima knocked softly on the door. After a moment, Adanna opened it, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked surprised to see him but didn't turn him away. "Chima, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I came to see if you're okay," Chima said, stepping inside. "I heard you crying." Adanna tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine. It's nothing." Chima gently took her hand. "Adanna, you don't have to pretend with me. I want to help you. Please, let me in." Adanna hesitated, then nodded, leading Chima to a small sitting area. They sat down in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Chima, concerned and wanting to help, gently asked, "Adanna, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Adanna's demeanor abruptly changed. Her eyes hardened, and she pulled away from him. "Why are you trying to get to know why I'm crying, Chima?" she snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. "You found me this way, and now you have a problem with it? Don't tell me how to live my life." Taken aback, Chima stammered, "I was just asking, Adanna. I care about you." Adanna's anger flared. "I've told you to stop asking questions about my life and respect my decisions. If you can't do that, then maybe you should leave." Chima, hurt and confused, stood up slowly. "I'm sorry, Adanna. I didn't mean to upset you." Adanna glared at him, her voice cold. "Just go, Chima." With a heavy heart, Chima left her house, not understanding Adanna's sudden anger. Over the next few days, their paths did not cross. Both of them were filled with sadness. At the market, Adanna's lively spirit was noticeably absent. She would smile, but her sense of humor was lacking, and customers noticed the difference. The vibrant energy that once surrounded her stall was replaced by a subdued air. Adanna herself was puzzled by her own feelings. She had always prided herself on her independence, never allowing herself to miss any man. But Chima's absence was different. She found herself thinking about him, longing for their conversations and his warm presence. This feeling was new and uncomfortable for her. Chima, on the other hand, was not handling the separation well either. He missed Adanna's laughter and their playful banter. He longed to see her, to talk to her, and to understand what had gone wrong. His days felt emptier without their interactions, and he found himself wandering near the market, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Despite their mutual longing, neither of them made a move to reconcile. Adanna was stubbornly holding onto her pride, unwilling to admit that she missed Chima. Chima, meanwhile, was hesitant, unsure of how to approach Adanna after their last encounter. The distance between them grew, and the vibrant connection they once shared seemed to fade into the background. Adanna's nights continued as they always had, with different men coming and going. But now, even in their company, she felt a sense of emptiness. The laughter she once found so easily was harder to summon, and her thoughts often drifted to Chima. She didn't understand why he had affected her so deeply, but she couldn't shake the feeling of loss that had settled in her heart. As the days turned into weeks, both Adanna and Chima struggled with their emotions. They were like two halves of a whole, each incomplete without the other. The village, too, sensed the change, whispering among themselves about the rift between Adanna and Chima. Everyone wondered why the two no longer spent time together. Chima's family began to notice his withdrawn demeanor. They started asking questions, concerned about why he seemed so downcast when he had a wedding to look forward to with a princess from another kingdom. As the prince of Umwofia, Chima had always been humble and unassuming. He often mingled with the villagers in plain clothing, shunning his royal attire to experience life as an ordinary person. Even as a child, he loved going outside and would insist that the royal guards follow from a distance and never refer to him as the prince. He cherished these moments of normalcy, free from the responsibilities of royalty. This desire for a simpler life was what led him to the market that fateful day and ultimately to Adanna. His family had no knowledge of his friendship with Adanna, and they certainly didn't know that he was falling in love with her. Chima was betrothed to marry a princess from another kingdom, a match that was meant to strengthen alliances. But Chima's thoughts were consumed by Adanna, and the more he tried to fight it, the stronger his feelings grew. Unable to bear missing Adanna any longer, Chima decided to seek her out. He left the palace in his usual plain attire and headed to the market. When he couldn't find her there, he felt a pang of worry and decided to go to her home. As he approached, he saw her sitting outside, looking exhausted and worn. Concerned, he hurried over to her. "Adanna, you don't look well. What's wrong?" Chima asked, his voice full of concern. Adanna looked up at him, her eyes red and tired. "I've been having nightmares recently," she said softly. Chima, puzzled, asked, "Nightmares? Why would you be having nightmares?" Adanna's expression turned sad, and she didn't say anything more. Just as Chima was about to press for details, a young man walked through the gate. Adanna's face changed instantly. It was clear she knew the young man, and he had an effect on her that Chima had never seen before. For the first time, Chima saw Adanna become vulnerable in the presence of a man. The young man approached them cautiously, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He greeted them both, his voice trembling. "Hello, Amara," he said, his gaze fixed on her. Adanna, visibly shaken, took a step back. Her eyes darted between Chima and the young man. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice unsteady. "Amara, it's me, Obi," the young man said, tears streaming down his face. "I've been looking for you for years. Why did you leave us?" Chima was stunned. He had always believed Adanna was an orphan, but here was a brother she had never mentioned. Obi kept calling Adanna by a name Chima didn't recognize, and Adanna kept insisting that he use the name she had chosen for herself, Adanna. Obi looked bewildered by her insistence. "Why are you calling yourself Adanna? What happened to Amara, the sister I knew?" His voice was a blend of frustration and heartbreak. Adanna's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and pain. "I changed my name for a reason, Obi. I didn't want to be found." Obi's face fell, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "That's why no one knew who you were when I went from village to village asking for you. Why did you make it so hard for us to find you?" Chima watched the exchange, his heart pounding with a mixture of shock and curiosity. He had never seen Adanna so vulnerable and defensive. The revelation that Adanna had a family, and that she had deliberately distanced herself from them, was astonishing. Adanna's voice hardened. "I didn't want to be found, Obi. You should have known and stopped looking for me." Obi's shoulders slumped in defeat, but he pressed on. "Amara, our mother is very sick. She's been asking for you. She needs you." Adanna's face twisted in pain, but she remained resolute. "I have no family, Obi. I'm not coming back." The pain in Obi's eyes was palpable. Adanna, please come home. Mother needs you. We all need you, he begged, his voice breaking. Adanna's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed firm. I have no family, Obi. I'm not coming back. Chima watched the exchange, his heart aching for both of them. He could see the love Adanna had for her brother, but he also saw the deep pain that was keeping her from returning home. Sensing it was getting late, he offered Obi a place to stay, not wanting the young man to be alone and homeless, especially when he was clearly in so much distress. Obi accepted gratefully, and Chima took him to the palace, explaining to his parents that he was helping out a friend. That night, Chima returned to Adanna's house. He found her sitting outside, her face streaked with tears. He sat down beside her and gently asked, Adanna, why did you send your brother away? Why are you denying your family? Adanna sobbed, unable to speak for a few moments. Finally, she whispered, It's too painful, Chima. I can't go back. Chima took her hand, offering her comfort and support. Adanna, whatever happened, you don't have to face it alone. I'm here for you. As Chima said this, a man walked into the yard. Adanna immediately told Chima that she would see him tomorrow. Chima felt a sharp pain seeing Adanna with another man, knowing what they were going to do. He watched helplessly as Adanna went into the house, leaving him outside. Chima was heartbroken. In the days that followed, Obi continued to visit Adanna, but he always used the name Amara, unable to adjust to calling her Adanna. Each time he said Amara, Adanna would flinch, a visible pain flickering across her face. She would correct him, insisting on Adanna. But Obi struggled to comply, the name change a stark reminder of the sister he felt he had lost. Chima and Obi became unlikely allies, united in their mission to convince Adanna to return home. Chima found himself more invested in Adanna's life than he had anticipated, his own feelings growing deeper with each passing day. He made Obi promise not to reveal that he was a prince, knowing that the revelation could complicate matters further. Obi, initially surprised that Adanna didn't know about Chima's royal status, agreed to the secrecy. One evening, as they walked back to the palace, Obi voiced his surprise. It's strange, you know? For someone who seems to care about you, she knows so little about you. Chima sighed, his thoughts heavy. Adanna never wants to go to a man's house. She values her independence and keeps her distance. She never asked where I lived, and I respected that. But it makes it harder for me to connect with her. The weeks stretched on, filled with relentless pleading from both Chima and Obi. They visited Adanna daily, each conversation a delicate dance of persuasion and patience. Chima would talk about the importance of family, the value of reconciliation, while Obi shared stories from home, painting vivid pictures of their mother and the life Adanna had left behind. Adanna remained resistant, her walls firmly in place. I built a new life here, she would say, her voice tinged with both defiance and fear. Going back means facing everything I ran away from. But gradually, cracks began to appear in her defenses. Chima noticed how she would linger longer in their conversations, her eyes softening when Obi spoke of their mother. The once unyielding resolve in her voice started to waver. One afternoon, as the three of them sat under the shade of a large tree, Chima took a deep breath and said, Adanna, you don't have to face it alone. Obi and I will be with you every step of the way. Obi nodded, his eyes earnest. Amara, Adanna, please. Mama needs you. We need you. Adanna's eyes filled with tears, the internal struggle evident in her expression. She looked at Chima, then at Obi, and finally, with a heavy sigh, she said, All right, I'll go home. The relief that washed over Chima and Obi was palpable. They both smiled, their persistence finally paying off. But Adanna's agreement was tinged with a deep-seated apprehension. her eyes betraying the fear she felt about returning to her past. Chima returned to the palace that evening, his heart lighter yet filled with new worries. He approached his parents, informing them of his decision to leave with Obi. His mother, the queen, looked at him with concern. "Chima, you have responsibilities here. Your wedding is approaching, and the kingdom needs you." Chima nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know, mother, but this is important. I need to help Obi." His father, the king, frowned. "You cannot neglect your duties, Chima. Remember your position." "I'll return soon," Chima promised. "I just need to make sure Obi gets home safely. He is going back home, so I am offering him support." Reluctantly, his parents agreed, though their expressions were filled with worry. They reminded him of his impending wedding. The union meant to strengthen ties with another kingdom. As Chima prepared to leave, he felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He hoped that this journey would bring Adanna the closure she needed and allow her to heal. But he also feared the challenges they might face, knowing that the path to reconciliation was fraught with uncertainty. The following morning, Chima, Obi, and Adanna set out on their journey. Chima left the palace with a heavy heart but a determined spirit. He had no idea what awaited them, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. His loyalty to Adanna and his commitment to helping her reclaim her life gave him strength. As they traveled, Chima observed the subtle changes in Adanna. She was quieter, more introspective, her usual vibrant energy subdued. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a fragile belief that perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to reconcile her past and present. Chima stayed close by her side, ready to offer support whenever she needed it. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but he was resolved to stand by Adanna, no matter what they encountered along the way. Chima, Obi, and Adanna returned home. Adanna's family home was well maintained, clearly indicating that they were not poor. As they approached the house, Adanna hesitated, her feet rooted to the spot, refusing to go inside. She stared at the house with wide, fearful eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Chima noticed her fear and wondered what had happened in this house to make her so scared. Obi, equally puzzled by Adanna's behavior, began to get irritated. "Amara, why are you acting like this towards Mama?" he snapped, his voice rising in frustration. "She's been heartbroken since you left. She asked about you every day, and here you are, being ungrateful." Adanna ignored him, her gaze fixed on the house. Obi sighed in exasperation and went ahead to call their mother. Moments later, their mother emerged from the house, her face lighting up with joy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she rushed forward, her arms open wide. "Amara, my daughter, I'm so glad to see you," she exclaimed, her voice choked with emotion. Adanna stood outside, holding her breath, her body tense. Chima watched her closely, seeing the tremors in her hands, the way her eyes darted around as if expecting something terrible to happen. He wondered what had transpired in this house to instill such fear in her. Obi, still irritated, said, "Amara, stop this. Come inside." Adanna ignored him, her attention focused solely on her mother. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her mother's expression faltered, a shadow passing over her face. She looked down, her voice trembling as she spoke. "He died years ago." Obi and Chima watched the exchange in silence, both sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. Adanna's body relaxed slightly, but the fear in her eyes remained. She then asked her mother, "Why did you want to see me?" Her mother, taken aback by the question, hesitated. "Amara, I am your mother. It's natural for me to be worried about you. I care about you." Adanna laughed bitterly, a harsh, mirthless sound that made Chima's heart ache. "When did you start caring about me? When did you start knowing what was best for me?" Her mother looked bewildered, her eyes wide with confusion. "Amara, I've always had your best interests at heart. I've always done what was best for you." Adanna chuckled in disbelief, shaking her head. "You care about me? Did that start when your husband died or when you fell sick and needed someone to take care of you? How many times did I ask you to be my mother, and you failed? How many times did I beg you to care about me and my needs, and you selfishly ignored my pleas?" Her mother opened her mouth to respond. "This is not the time for us to talk about this, Amara." But Adanna cut her off, her voice rising with anger. "Why not? Are you afraid Obi will see the kind of person you truly are?" Adanna shot back, tears streaming down her face. The raw pain in her voice made Chima's chest tighten. He wanted to reach out to her, to offer some comfort, but he knew this was something she had to face on her own. Her mother flinched, her eyes darting to Obi, who looked utterly confused. "You're ungrateful, Amara. You should be thankful that I helped our family," her mother retorted, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and defensiveness. Obi, trying to make sense of the conversation, asked, "What is she talking about, Mama?" Both women ignored him, their focus entirely on each other. Adanna's mother pleaded, "What was I supposed to do, Amara? He was gonna throw us out. We would have been homeless." Adanna's face contorted with rage and pain, as if she had been punched in the stomach. "So, you're still unapologetic? You still don't see anything wrong with what you did? I shouldn't be surprised. Even after all these years, you're still selfish. I thought this illness might have made you human." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out a trembling hand. "Amara, please. I did what I thought was best. We needed a roof over our heads, food to eat. I had no choice." Adanna stepped back, shaking her head. "You always had a choice. You just chose the easy way out, the way that sacrificed me for your comfort." Her voice broke, and she turned away, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Chima's heart ached for her. He could see the depth of her pain, the wounds that had never healed. He wished he could take her away from this place, away from the memories that haunted her. But he knew she needed to confront this, to find some way to heal. Obi kept asking what they were talking about, but they continued to ignore him. Adanna's mother defended herself. "I did what I had to do for all of us to have a better life. You should be appreciative. You saved our family, Amara. This shows how strong you are. I would have preferred homelessness over what you put me through. You did this for yourself, not for us." Adanna replied, her voice breaking. "I am not strong, Mama. I am afraid to sleep alone. I sleep with different men every night to avoid nightmares. I am trapped in a life I don't want, and you have the nerve to call me strong. Why couldn't you sacrifice yourself instead of me?" Her mother, still justifying her actions, said, "He didn't want me, he wanted you. I did what I had to do." Obi, still trying to understand, looked between his mother and sister, his expression one of growing horror. "Amara, please, tell me what's going on." Adanna glanced at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "You don't want to know, Obi. Trust me." But Obi shook his head, determination in his eyes. "No, I do, Amara. I need to know." Adanna took a deep breath, her hands trembling. She looked at her mother, who was silently pleading with her not to speak. But Adanna had carried this burden for too long. She needed to let it out. "You want to know what we're talking about? Fine, I'll tell you," she said, her voice trembling with the effort to remain steady. "Your mother allowed her husband, you father, to come into my room every night and have his way with me. Chima felt a cold chill run down his spine at her words. Obi's face went pale, and he sank to the ground, unable to process what he had just heard. Adanna's mother began to sob, covering her face with her hands. "He was going to leave me, Amara. He told me to give you to him, or we'd be out on the streets," she cried. "I chose to do what was best for all of us." Adanna's eyes burned with tears. "You could have gone back home, Mama. You didn't have to live on the streets. You could have loved me more than your comfortable life," she shouted, her voice breaking with emotion. "Instead, you made sure I was ready every night to keep profiting off me. Even now, you used Obi to find me because you're selfish." Obi, sitting on the ground, was overwhelmed with guilt and confusion. Chima, shocked by the revelation, finally understood why Adanna was the way she was. They kept silent for a while, with no one saying anything. Their mother finally spoke, her voice cold and defensive. "You should not have come, Amara, because clearly you are still dramatic. You still don't see that I did not have a choice and that I did what I had to do." Adanna looked at her mother in disbelief, her eyes filled with hurt. The silence in the air was thick with tension, each second amplifying the pain she felt. Obi was furious, his face contorted with anger. "How could you let that happen?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the stillness. "What kind of mother are you?" Their mother glared at him, her eyes hard and unyielding. "I am still your mother, and you should have some respect for me," she snapped, her voice cold and unfeeling. Adanna turned to Chima, her voice breaking with emotion. "You see why I didn't want to come here? You see why I begged you not to bring me here?" Her eyes pleaded with him for understanding. She then looked back at her mother, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and pain. "Well, since you said I should be grateful, Mama, then let me thank you. Thank you for ruining my life, for breaking me. Thank you for making me so broken that I can't sleep at night without having nightmares, and now need to sleep with different men just so I won't have to sleep alone, Mama. Thank you for making me like this." She paused, her voice trembling as she tried to steady herself. "I have a friend who cares about me. Chima cares, but I can't trust him because I saw how cruel the world is from a very young age because you failed to protect me. Thank you so much for making it my responsibility at 10 years old to make sure your marriage worked and that we had a roof over our heads and food to eat. Thank you so much, Mama." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken suffering. Adanna turned to Chima and Obi, her voice resolute despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm leaving. You can stay if you want." She began walking away, her steps shaky but determined. She then stopped and turned back to her mother, her voice filled with a newfound strength. "I forgive you, Mama. I refuse to be a prisoner of your selfishness anymore. I will work on myself and be a better person. I had turned into someone I am not, detached from humans and using other people like they were objects. I didn't realize that that only hurt me more than it hurt them. I was hurting myself while you had no regrets for your actions, Mama. Continue to live in this grand house. Continue spending the money you were willing to give up my childhood for. I hope you enjoy it. I am setting myself free, and I forgive you. I forgive you, Mama." Her voice echoed with finality as she turned and walked away, leaving her mother standing there in stunned silence. Obi, angered, shouted at his mother, "You let me think Amara abandoned us. You told me she was rebellious, but it was all because you wanted to keep your comfortable life. I am leaving and going with Amara. I hope you will enjoy staying in this grand house since you did what you had to do. Enjoy your hard work then, Mama." Chima followed Adanna and held her as she cried uncontrollably. They left for the village of Umwofia. The journey back was tense, filled with unspoken words and heavy hearts. Adanna felt like she was reliving her childhood trauma, while Obi battled with guilt for resenting his sister. He remembered waking up one day to find that his sister had sneaked out in the night, and no one knew where she had gone. The memory was vivid, the morning air still fresh in his mind, the panic that gripped him when he realized Amara was gone. He remembered the happy child his sister used to be, her laughter filling their home with warmth and joy. Amara was always so protective of him, even with their parents. She never left him alone in a room with them, and he thought it was normal behavior. Obi loved how she loved him, her unwavering dedication and her sense of humor that could lighten any mood. He always laughed when he was with Amara, his hero, the one who always cared about seeing him happy, the one who was always there through it all. He knew how much she loved him, and he couldn't understand why she had left without saying anything. For years, he was angry at her, resentment building up as their mother kept fueling that anger, bad-mouthing Amara at every opportunity. She painted Amara as rebellious, ungrateful, and selfish, and Obi believed her, not knowing the true depth of his sister's pain. Now that he knew what had caused Amara's departure, he was filled with sadness and guilt. He felt like he had failed his sister. He should have seen that something was wrong. He should have seen that when his sister kept running away from home, it was a cry for help. Yes, he was young, but he should have asked. Amara always asked him when she noticed something was wrong and kept pressing until he told her. So why didn't he do the same? Why didn't he push harder to understand her pain? Obi battled with these thoughts as they made their way to Umwofia. His whole life had changed in just a matter of hours, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on his heart. The journey was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts, the gravity of the past hanging over them like a dark cloud. Obi felt an overwhelming sense of regret and sorrow. He thought of all the times Amara had protected him, the lengths she went to ensure he was safe and happy. He recalled her laughter, her comforting presence, and her relentless love. How could he have been so blind to her suffering? How could he have let his mother's words poison his mind against the sister who had sacrificed so much for him? As they neared Umwofia, Obi's resolve strengthened. He would make things right with Amara. He would support her and help her heal, just as she had always done for him. His heart ached for the years they had lost, but he was determined to make up for them. The journey to Umwofia was not just a physical one, but an emotional one as well. A journey of understanding, forgiveness, and the rekindling of a bond that had been nearly destroyed by lies and deceit. Chima, on the other hand, felt defeated. He had been holding Adanna all this while, not knowing what to say to her. The words he wanted to express felt inadequate in the face of her overwhelming pain. Instead, he just held her, letting her know through his silent presence that he was there for her, offering a steady shoulder to lean on. Their journey back to the village was quiet, the silence heavy with unspoken emotions. Adanna clung to Chima, her tears slowly subsiding as the reality of her confrontation settled in. Obi walked beside them, lost in his own thoughts and regrets, a new determination forming in his heart. Once they returned to the village, Adanna and Obi began the difficult process of rebuilding their relationship. There were many wounds to heal, many apologies to be made, and much trust to be restored. It was not an easy journey, but with patience and effort, they started to find their way back to each other. They spent hours talking, reminiscing about happier times, and slowly piecing together the fragments of their broken bond. Adanna, with the support of Obi and Chima, embarked on a journey of healing. She decided to reclaim the name Amara, the name that had once been a source of pain and suffering. It was a symbolic step, a way to take back her power and no longer run from her past. Amara knew it would take time for everyone to get used to her name being Amara again, but she was ready for the challenge. The healing process was slow and often painful. Amara confronted her memories and traumas, facing them head-on rather than hiding from them. She found solace in talking about her experiences, slowly peeling back the layers of hurt and finding the strength to move forward. Obi and Chima stood by her side throughout this journey. They encouraged her, supported her, and celebrated her small victories. Their presence was a constant reminder that she was not alone, that she had people who loved and believed in her. As Amara reclaimed her identity and found peace within herself, she started to dream again. She envisioned a future where her past did not define her, but rather shaped her into a stronger, more compassionate person. She knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them with courage and resilience. As Chima returned to the palace, his parents reminded him that his wedding was fast approaching. His future bride, a charming and excited young woman, had been eagerly awaiting his return. This was their time to bond and prepare for their future together. Despite the circumstances, Chima's heart remained with Amara. He tried desperately to put her out of his mind, convincing himself that now that she was on her way to healing, he could fulfill his familial duties. The transformation from Adanna to Amara was a significant step for her, a reclaiming of her power and identity. Though it took Chima some time to adjust to calling her by her reclaimed name, he supported her journey wholeheartedly. He was committed to ensuring she healed and moved forward, even if it meant stepping back from her life. Chima had always known that he was betrothed to the princess. It was a path laid out for him long before he met Amara. The weight of his responsibilities as the future king loomed large, and he resolved to do what was expected of him. He made the difficult decision to marry the princess and focus on his royal duties, trying to suppress his feelings for Amara. He stopped going to see Amar and Obi in the hope that his feelings for her will disappear. He did not tell them anything but just stopped going. Meanwhile, Obi and Amara were rebuilding their relationship, rediscovering the sibling bond that had been severed by years of pain and misunderstanding. Obi noticed a change in his sister. She seemed less joyful, a shadow of her former self. He suspected that Chima's absence was the cause. Obi had seen the love in Chima's eyes and the way he cared for Amara, and he knew his sister felt the same way. Determined to understand why Chima had stopped visiting, Obi decided to go to the palace and confront him. Amara, too, felt the void left by Chima's absence. She had been reluctant to know much about his life before, but now she was driven by the need for answers. The peaceful, albeit chaotic, life she once had was disrupted by Chima's presence. He had come into her life, turned it upside down, and then disappeared. Amara resolved to find out where he lived and confront him. She wanted to demand an explanation for his sudden disappearance, for daring to make her feel things she had long since buried, and then abandoning her. Obi went to the palace and asked to see Chima. When he was finally allowed inside, he was shocked to find Chima with the princess. Chima, noticing Obi's presence, excused himself and approached his friend. Obi, taken aback by the situation, immediately questioned Chima about his sudden absence from their lives. "Why haven't you come to see us?" Obi asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Amara is no longer happy. She's been asking where you are, and I've kept that information from her out of respect for you. If you've moved on, why didn't you let us know so she can move on with her life too?" Chima looked conflicted, the weight of his royal responsibilities clear on his face. "Obi, I've played my part in helping Amara heal. Now it's time for me to fulfill my duties as a prince. I've known for a long time that I must marry the princess. This was decided long before I met Amara. Now that she's on her way to healing, I must solidify my position and marry her." Obi, puzzled and hurt, pressed further. "Then why did you give us the impression that you loved my sister? Why don't you come and tell her that you're getting married and who you really are?" Chima remained silent, unable to find the words. Deep down, he knew he couldn't handle the look on Amara's face if he told her the truth. Obi, disappointed, returned home to Amara. He chose not to reveal that he had visited Chima, nor did he disclose Chima's royal status, believing that Chima should be the one to tell her. Meanwhile, Amara had returned to her market stall, and the village noticed a change in her. Men no longer visited her house, and she was more lively. The revelation of her real name had taken the villagers by surprise. Although she didn't explain why she changed her name, they respected her decision to now use Amara instead of Adanna. However, not everyone supported her, with some villagers feeling she was trying to escape her past as a promiscuous woman and pretend to be someone she was not. In the days that followed, Amara's mind was consumed with thoughts of Chima. She replayed every moment they had spent together, trying to understand how she had missed such a crucial piece of information. Determined to find answers, she asked around the village about Chima's whereabouts. The villagers confirmed they had often seen him entering the palace grounds but assumed he was a worker there. Amara decided to confront Chima directly. She made her way to the palace gates and asked the guards if they knew him. The guards told her there was no worker named Chima, and the only Chima they knew was the prince. Disappointed and confused, Amara asked if any workers had a son named Chima, thinking maybe he visited them at the palace. The guards said no. Starting to question everything, Amara briefly considered that Chima might indeed be the prince, but she quickly dismissed the thought. She had never seen him in royal attire before, and royalty typically flaunted their wealth and status. Chima had never done that. Refusing to give up, Amara planned to wait at the palace gates after closing her stall, hoping to catch Chima. She needed to understand why he had come into her life, changed it so profoundly, and then vanished without explanation. She was determined to get answers no matter what it took. One sunny day while Amara was at her stall, she heard the unmistakable sound of royal horns echoing through the village. Everyone knew that this heralded an important event involving the royal family. Villagers immediately stopped what they were doing and hurried toward the source of the commotion, eager to see what was happening. Amara, however, had never been interested in royal affairs. She remained at her stall, ready to serve anyone who shared her indifference to the royal spectacle. As the crowd surged forward, Amara noticed the throng moving closer to her stall. Curiosity piqued. She stood up and peered over the heads of the gathering villagers. Amidst the sea of people, she saw a figure that made her heart skip a beat. It was Chima, but dressed in the elaborate attire of royalty. She blinked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The Chima she knew was an ordinary, humble man, not someone who belonged in the royal spotlight. She stood up straighter, straining to get a clearer view, to confirm whether her eyes were deceiving her. The royal announcer's voice rang out over the crowd, proclaiming the upcoming wedding of Prince Chima and his new bride. He invited the community to join in the celebrations, proudly presenting the prince and his fiancée. The villagers and market sellers were taken aback. They had seen Chima in the community, interacting with everyone as a kind, respectful man. None of them had known him as the prince. They had assumed he was a palace worker because he didn't carry himself with the airs of royalty. Amara stood rooted to the spot, a whirlwind of emotions surging through her. She felt both hot and cold, her body shivering and sweating simultaneously. The realization that Chima was a prince, and that he was getting married, was like a punch to the gut. Questions bombarded her mind. Why hadn't he told her who he was? Why had he disappeared without a word? Was his impending marriage the reason for his sudden disappearance? Determined to make her presence known, Amara fixed her gaze on Chima. She wanted him to see her, to know that she had seen him. Chima, aware of where her stall was, made a conscious effort to avoid looking in that direction. He kept smiling and looking elsewhere, trying to maintain the facade of joy and composure. But Amara, stubborn and resolute, moved into his line of sight. She wanted answers, and she was not going to let him hide. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, Chima saw the pain and betrayal in Amara's eyes. It was too much for him to bear, and he quickly turned away, his heart heavy with guilt and sorrow. Amara's anger flared. She imagined taking off her shoe and throwing it at him, envisioning it hitting him squarely on the head and causing him to faint. But reality quickly set in. She knew that assaulting the prince, no matter how justified she felt, would bring severe repercussions from the community. With the last shred of dignity she had, Amara returned to her stall. She began packing her things, her movements quick and deliberate. Chima, aware of what she might do, kept an eye on her. He knew how stubborn she was and anticipated that she wouldn't let this go easily. He also knew that Amara was likely thinking of 100 ways to make him pay for his deception. It was that very stubbornness and spirit that he had fallen in love with. As Amara packed her belongings, she fought back tears. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, but she refused to show her vulnerability in front of the onlookers. With her head held high, she walked away from the market, determined to confront Chima and demand the truth. She couldn't understand why he had kept such a monumental secret from her and why he had disappeared without a word. Her mind raced with thoughts of how to get the answers she needed and the justice she deserved. Princess Nena, oblivious to Chima's inner turmoil, continued basking in the sheer joy of having won the man all other princesses coveted. She relished the attention and the admiration from the crowd, confident in her newfound status. Meanwhile, Chima, feeling the weight of his deceit and the sight of Amara's hurt, turned his gaze towards her stall, hoping for a glimpse of her. Not seeing her there, he anxiously scanned the crowd until he finally spotted Amara walking away, her posture rigid with anger. His heart shattered, knowing he had hurt her deeply. Despite his growing despair, Chima knew he couldn't abandon the parade without incurring his parents' wrath. He remained, his heart heavy, trying to focus on his duties. Chima and Nena mingled with the crowd, as was expected of them. They were to be the future leaders of the community, and this was part of their role. However, Chima's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the image of Amara's pained expression. Determined to avoid any further encounters with her, he cut their village tour short and led the group back to the palace. Nena, still on a high from the day's events, excitedly recounted their journey through the village to Chima's parents. She described the beauty of the village and how wonderful it was to meet the people they would one day lead. Chima, however, sat in silence, barely hearing a word she said. His mind was consumed by thoughts of Amara. His family noticed his distraction and, concerned, asked if he was feeling all right. Chima, unable to endure the situation any longer, asked to be excused and left the room. Obi remained silent, a guilty look on his face. Amara, noticing his expression, demanded to know if he had known the truth. With shame, Obi admitted that he had known for some time about Chima's true identity and his upcoming marriage. He explained that Chima had asked him not to tell her, fearing it would complicate things when they were on their way home. Amara's heartbreak deepened, but she steeled herself, reminding herself that she had endured worse. Determined not to let Chima off easily, Amara vowed to attend the wedding celebrations. She would make sure Chima knew the pain he had caused her. The announcer during the parade had mentioned the date for the pre-wedding celebration, and Amara decided she would make an appearance. She selected one of the finest fabrics from her stall and crafted a stunning dress. She wanted Chima's heart to race and his throat to tighten when he saw her. She envisioned him choking on his food and feeling the full weight of his deceit. As Amara sat down to sew, she felt a surge of determination. Each stitch she made was precise and deliberate, reflecting her resolve to face Chima with strength and dignity. The fabric she chose was a deep, rich color that complemented her complexion perfectly. It was a bold color, one that demanded attention and respect. Amara wanted to show Chima that she was not broken, that she was a woman of strength and resilience. With each stitch, memories of Chima flooded her mind. The joy of their time together, the laughter, the shared dreams. It all seemed like a cruel illusion now, but she reminded herself that she had been through worse. A man, no matter how charming or deceitful, was not bigger than the problems she had faced. She had survived heartbreak before, and she would survive this too. Amara's thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions. She felt anger and betrayal, but also a fierce determination to show Chima that she was stronger than the pain he had inflicted. She wanted him to feel the weight of his deceit pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe, to swallow, to maintain his facade. She wanted him to know that his actions had consequences and that she would not be easily forgotten or dismissed. As she sewed, Amara imagined the scene at the celebration. She pictured Chima's reaction when he saw her in the stunning dress she was creating. She envisioned his heart racing, his throat tightening, his eyes widening in shock and regret. She wanted him to feel the full impact of his betrayal. She hoped he would choke on his food, his face turning red with embarrassment and discomfort, the entire court witnessing his humiliation. She even fantasized about him choking and peeing on himself, anything that would make him feel the pain and humiliation she was feeling. The dress began to take shape, and with it, Amara's resolve solidified. She was not just sewing a dress. She was crafting a weapon, one that would make Chima regret ever crossing her. The intricate details she added were not just embellishments. They were symbols of her strength and resilience. Each bead, each thread, was a testament to her ability to rise above the pain and reclaim her dignity. Amara worked late into the night, her fingers moving deftly, her mind focused on the task at hand. She would not let Chima have it easy. By the time she was done, he would learn not to mess with her. She reminded herself that she had been through worse, and she would not let a man's betrayal break her. The day of the celebrations arrived, and Amara, determined and resolute, made her way to the palace yard. She was a beautiful woman, and her dress, made from the finest fabric she sold, accentuated her elegance and strength. She found a place to sit and waited for the festivities to start. As the palace yard filled with people, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The vibrant chatter of the villagers mingled with the lively music, creating a festive mood. Colorful decorations adorned the palace walls, and the air was thick with the scent of freshly prepared food. Finally, the royal horns blared, signaling the grand entrance of the prince and princess. The crowd fell silent, eyes turning towards the large ornate doors of the palace. They swung open, revealing Prince Chima and his bride-to-be, Princess Nena. Dressed in a magnificent traditional attire, Nena's radiant smile captivated everyone. Chima, however, wore a forced smile, his eyes scanning the crowd anxiously. He did not expect Amara to be there, and so he knew his day will go smoothly. Amara watched the scene unfold with a mixture of emotions. Her expression, however, remained indifferent, almost bored, as if she was unbothered by the spectacle. Ifani, standing beside Chima, scanned the crowd and his eyes landed on Amara. He nudged Chima, breaking the prince's facade. "Who is that striking woman?" Ifani asked, his curiosity piqued. Chima, caught off guard, followed Ifani's gaze and spotted Amara. His heart sank. She looked stunning, the dress she made accentuating her beauty and strength. The sight of her brought a wave of regret and guilt crashing over him. He had not anticipated her presence, and seeing her here, looking so composed, unsettled him deeply. Amara, aware of Chima's reaction, maintained her composure. She knew her presence had the desired effect, but the weight of her emotions was heavy. She noted Chima's uneasy demeanor and the way he seemed to deliberately avoid her gaze. She felt a pang of satisfaction seeing him uncomfortable. Satisfied with seeing Chima squirm, she decided it was time to leave. She had made her point and didn't want to subject herself to this emotional torture any longer. With a determined breath, Amara stood up. Her movement was graceful, her head held high, embodying her inner strength and resilience. She began walking towards the palace gates, each step measured and deliberate. The fabric of her dress flowed elegantly around her, drawing the eyes of many in the crowd. Noticing her departure, Ifani quickly moved in her direction. He called out to her, "Why are you leaving? The festivities are just beginning." Amara, maintaining her composure, replied, "I have seen the beautiful couple, and I am happy for them. That is all I needed to do." Amused and intrigued, Ifani introduced himself. "I am Ifani," he said with a charming smile. "Amara," she responded, not knowing he was Chima's friend. Chima, scanning the crowd, saw Amara near the palace gates talking to Ifani. Their apparent comfort and laughter irritated him. Why were they laughing? What could they possibly be talking about? Chima wondered. He signaled a guard and instructed him to call Ifani over. The guard approached Ifani and conveyed Chima's message. Though Amara couldn't hear the conversation, she assumed it must be important. She politely excused herself and thanked Ifani for his company. Before she could leave, Ifani asked, "When will I see you again?" Amara, ever the businesswoman, replied, "I sell at the market. My time is money, so if you want to see me, you'll have to bring value and buy something." Ifani laughed with admiration, watching her walk away. He stood there, captivated by her presence, until she disappeared from sight. Chima, observing the entire exchange from a distance, felt a mix of anger and frustration. He struggled to look away, his mind racing with jealousy and regret. He watched as Ifani returned, his demeanor filled with curiosity and excitement. Ifani's evident interest in Amara only intensified Chima's inner turmoil, making it clear that he had lost more than he had anticipated. As Amara walked away, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced Chima and his new life head-on, showing him that she was not broken. Her resolve remained strong, and the encounter with Ifani, though unexpected, had provided a brief distraction from her heartache. Chima was irritated the whole time during the ceremony because Ifani could not stop talking about Amara. Ifani kept marveling at how amazing she was, and Chima wished he could just disappear. After the ceremony, Princess Nena couldn't stop talking about how beautiful she looked, how everyone was admiring her, and how perfect their wedding was going to be. Chima felt she was being overly self-centered, which only added to his irritation. Ifani's constant chatter about Amara continued, and Princess Nena, clearly excited by the prospect, started suggesting double dates with Ifani and the woman he kept raving about. "Oh, it would be wonderful. We could get to know Ifani's Amara better. What do you think, Chima?" Nena said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Chima forced a smile, barely able to conceal his frustration. He could feel his patience wearing thin. Every time he tried to leave, his father would tell him to sit down, keeping him trapped in the conversation. "I think it's a splendid idea," Ifani added with enthusiasm. "Amara is truly fascinating. I want to spend more time with her." Chima's grip on the armrest tightened. He glanced at Ifani, who seemed oblivious to his discomfort, and then at Nena, who was blissfully unaware of the tension in the room. "Ifani, why don't you just go see her now?" Chima suggested, trying to hide the annoyance in his voice. "I plan to," Ifani said with a grin. "In fact, I don't think I'll be leaving this village anytime soon. There's just too much to explore, and Amara, well, she's worth every moment." Chima's father, noticing the tension, looked at his son sternly. "Chima, sit down. We are not finished here." Chima sighed, resigning himself to endure the rest of the evening. He could feel his irritation growing with each passing minute. Ifani's relentless praise of Amara and Nena's self-centeredness made the situation unbearable. As the evening dragged on, Chima's thoughts kept returning to Amara. The image of her laughing with Ifani at the market filled him with jealousy. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered, adding to his growing frustration. Finally, the evening ended, and Chima retreated to his quarters. He needed to find a way to deal with his feelings for Amara and the complicated situation he found himself in. But for now, he was just glad the torturous evening was over. Over the next couple of days, Ifani frequently visited the market to see Amara. Each visit deepened his fascination with her. He admired her resilience and the easy confidence she exuded, qualities that set her apart from anyone he had ever met. Ifani found himself drawn to the way Amara carried herself, her every move filled with a quiet strength. She was not just a beautiful woman. She was a force of nature, someone who faced life's challenges head-on. At the market, Amara was in her element. She skillfully managed her stall, engaging with customers with a warm smile and a sharp wit. Ifani loved watching her interact with others, noting how her eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor. She had a way of making people feel at ease, effortlessly charming those around her. Despite Ifani's growing affection, Amara's heart remained tethered to Chima. She tried to push thoughts of him aside, focusing instead on the present and the joy she found in Ifani's company. He made her laugh, a sound that felt foreign to her after so much heartache. Yet, in the quiet moments when the market slowed, she found her thoughts drifting back to Chima. Amara appreciated Ifani's attentions, recognizing his genuine interest and kindness. She enjoyed their conversations, which often stretched into the late afternoon, as they discussed everything from village life to their personal dreams and aspirations. Ifani had a way of making her feel valued and seen, a stark contrast to the turmoil she felt when thinking of Chima. Ifani, on his part, found himself eagerly anticipating his visits to the market. He loved how Amara made him laugh without even trying, her sense of humor a refreshing change from the often serious conversations he had at the palace. He admired her determination and the way she navigated her business with such efficiency and grace. Every evening, when Ifani returned to the palace, he would recount his day to the family, his stories inevitably circling back to Amara. He spoke of her with such enthusiasm that it caught everyone's attention. Princess Nena, in particular, seemed delighted by the idea of her wedding being the catalyst for such a charming romance. As Ifani's tales of Amara continued, Chima found himself listening with a mix of emotions. He knew firsthand how easy it was to fall in love with Amara, and each word from Ifani felt like a dagger to his heart. The more Ifani spoke, the more Chima realized the depth of his own feelings. Every time Ifani returned from the market, he would regale the family with stories about Amara and his time spent with her. Chima, knowing how easy it was to fall in love with Amara, saw the necessity of telling his friend about his feelings. He waited for a moment when he was alone with Ifani. Taking a deep breath, Chima confessed, "Ifani, I need to tell you something important. I am in love with Amara. I only agreed to marry Princess Nena because it was my duty and because I knew my family would never accept Amara." Ifani was taken aback. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why let me spend so much time with her?" he asked, visibly shocked. Chima explained, "I thought my feelings for Amara would fade over time, but they haven't. It's been torture seeing you get close to her." Understanding the depth of Chima's turmoil, Ifani nodded. "I get it now. I didn't know, and I'm sorry. I'll keep my relationship with Amara platonic. I value our friendship too much to let this come between us." Chima felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Ifani. I know I can't keep Amara from finding someone else, but it would be unbearable if that someone was you, and I had to see her with you all the time." Ifani's understanding and promise provided Chima with a small measure of comfort. However, the situation also highlighted the painful complexity of his feelings and the sacrifices he had to make for his family and duty. Over the next few days, Chima grew increasingly anxious about Amara. He found himself unable to shake the feeling that he needed to know more about her life. Driven several guards standing outside. They pushed past her, immediately starting to pack up her belongings. Bewildered and frightened, Amara demanded to know what was happening. "Why are you doing this? What have I done wrong?" Amara's voice trembled as she tried to comprehend the situation. The lead guard, without emotion, responded, "By order of Prince Chima, you have been banished from the kingdom. You must leave immediately." Amara's heart sank. She felt as if she had been punched in the stomach, her knees becoming weak. She sank to the ground, overwhelmed by shock and disbelief. Obi, equally bewildered, tried to reason with the guards, but their efforts were in vain. The guards continued to pack their belongings, indifferent to the pleas and confusion. The commotion soon woke the neighbors, who gathered outside Amara's house, whispering amongst themselves. They watched in shock as Amara's possessions were thrown out, their curiosity and concern growing with each passing minute. Why would Chima do this? Obi kept asking, his voice desperate for answers. "We have done nothing wrong. Why would he banish us in the middle of the night?" Amara, struggling to hold herself together, could only shake her head in response. She was numb, unable to understand why Chima would do something so cruel. He had made it clear that he did not want her, and though it hurt deeply, she had accepted it. But to banish her in the middle of the night, knowing she and Obi had nowhere to go, felt like an unbearable betrayal. Gathering her strength, Amara stood up. With tears streaming down her face, she begged the guards for a chance to speak with Chima, hoping to understand why he would do this. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The guards remained resolute, their orders clear and unyielding. As she gathered her belongings, Amara felt a profound sense of loss. This house represented more than just a place to live. It was a symbol of her resilience and independence. It was where she had begun to heal from her past, where she had built a life she was proud of. The thought of leaving it all behind, of starting over again, filled her with a deep, indescribable pain. With the last of her belongings packed, Amara and Obi were escorted out of the house. Amara took one final look at the place she had called home, the place where she had fought to reclaim her dignity and build a life free from her past. The tears continued to fall as she and Obi walked away, the weight of the loss pressing heavily on her shoulders. As they walked into the night, Amara's heart ached not just for herself, but for the life she had built, the dreams she had nurtured, and the stability she had fought so hard to achieve. The path ahead seemed uncertain and daunting, but with Obi by her side, she knew she had to find the strength to keep moving forward. Together, they walked away from the only home they had known, into an uncertain future.
Please let me know what you think about the story, and share with me what morals you could pick from the story. Most importantly, this story is an awareness against the danger of child abuse, so please do well to share with your loved ones and like this story also. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you've not done so.
Amara and Obi walked through the night, their steps heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. The path ahead was unclear, and each step seemed more challenging than the last. The moon cast a silver glow on the dirt road, illuminating their weary faces. Obi, a young man burdened with worry, looked at his sister, his voice heavy with concern as he asked, "Sister, where will we go? We do not know anyone here." Amara, consumed by her own pain, allowed tears to fall freely down her cheeks. She squeezed Obi's hand, trying to offer him some comfort despite her own despair. "I don't know, Obi," she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. "How could Chima do this to us? I didn't know he could be this cruel, to banish us when we did nothing to him." Obi, struggling to make sense of the situation, suggested with a determined edge in his voice, "Sister, we should go back and fight. They can't just banish us like that from our home for no reason. We have to fight." Amara shook her head, her voice firm despite her sorrow. "If Chima doesn't want me in his life, then so be it." They continued walking until they reached an empty marketplace. The stalls stood silent, shadows cast by the moonlight creating an eerie atmosphere. The wooden stalls, usually bustling with activity, now appeared ghostly and abandoned. Deciding they had no other option, Amara and Obi settled down to sleep on the hard ground, using their meager belongings as pillows. The cold stone beneath them was unforgiving, and the chill of the night seeped into their bones. The night was long and cold, filled with restless dreams and whispered reassurances. Amara lay awake, staring at the star-filled sky, her mind racing with thoughts of what they had lost and what the future held. Obi, despite his attempts to stay awake and keep watch, eventually succumbed to sleep, his body curled up beside his sister for warmth. As dawn broke, the marketplace slowly came to life. The first rays of sunlight bathed the stalls in a soft, golden light, casting long shadows across the ground. Amara and Obi woke to the sounds of vendors setting up their stalls, the air filling with the chatter of early morning customers. The aroma of freshly baked bread and ripe fruits filled the air, momentarily lifting their spirits. Amara, despite her fatigue, approached the vendors, inquiring if there were any vacant houses or rooms they could rent. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her desperation. The vendors, seeing the two weary travelers, offered sympathetic smiles and directed her to a small boarding house at the edge of the marketplace. Her independence and the savings from her business gave her the confidence to secure a temporary place for them. She counted out the coins with shaking hands, grateful for the foresight that had led her to save her earnings. The landlord, a kind-faced elderly woman, took pity on them and offered a modest room for a fair price. They eventually found a small, modest room to rent. The room was sparsely furnished with a single bed, a rickety table, and a chair. The walls were bare, but it was clean and offered them a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. It was far from what they were used to, but it offered them a roof over their heads and a sense of security, however temporary. Amara knew she had to stay strong for Obi's sake, even as her heart ached for the home she had built and the life they had left behind in Umwofia. She set about making the room as comfortable as possible, arranging their few belongings and ensuring Obi felt safe. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she vowed to find a way forward for both of their sakes. She planned to stay in that room for the month and would look for a house in the month they were staying in this small room. Back at the palace, Chima was oblivious to the events that had transpired. He paced anxiously, waiting for a report from the guard he had tasked with watching over Amara. Hours turned into a restless night, and when the guard didn't come, Chima's impatience grew unbearable. Summoning the guard to his chambers, he felt a mix of frustration and dread. "Why haven't you given me a report about Amara?" Chima demanded, his voice sharp with impatience. The guard, looking surprised and slightly apprehensive, bowed respectfully before responding. "My prince, we received orders from you yesterday to banish her from the land. Now she is gone." Chima stared at the guard, disbelief and confusion flooding his mind. He could barely process the words he was hearing. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, struggling to contain his shock. The guard repeated, "Amara and Obi were banished at midnight. They have left the village." Chima's heart sank. His pulse quickened as he felt a rush of panic. "Who gave these instructions?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "The chief guard said the orders came from you, my prince," the guard explained, his expression puzzled but sincere. Without another word, Chima turned on his heel and rushed to find the chief guard. His footsteps echoed through the corridors of the palace, his mind racing with thoughts of Amara and Obi. He found the chief guard in conversation with his mother, the queen, who stood with an air of calm authority. The chief guard was reporting that Amara and Obi had not returned to the village, and that they would continue to ensure they didn't come back. "Mother, why would you banish a woman who did nothing wrong?" Chima asked, his voice filled with anger and hurt. The betrayal stung deeply, and he struggled to keep his composure. The queen, unfazed by his outburst, responded coolly, "Yes, I banished her. You've been running after her like a puppy. Did you think we wouldn't find out? We will not let you tarnish the image your father and I have worked so hard to build." "Chima, how did you even find out about her?" Chima demanded, his frustration mounting. He felt cornered, a sense of helplessness seeping into his bones. "I am the queen of this land. I know everything," she replied with an air of superiority. "It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that things are back to normal now." Chima's eyes blazed with fury. "Amara did not deserve to be a pawn in your game. She did nothing wrong, yet you sent her out in the middle of the night. As a woman, you showed no care for another woman's safety. What kind of person are you to do such a thing?" The queen remained indifferent, her gaze unwavering. "That is not my concern, Chima. My concern is protecting this throne and this kingdom." Chima's voice trembled with emotion, a mix of rage and desperation. "I have always done what you asked, putting my own feelings aside, but you have gone too far this time. You better pray nothing happens to them, because if it does, I will never forgive you." His words hung in the air, a heavy silence following his declaration. The queen's face remained stoic, but Chima could feel the tension between them, a chasm that had suddenly opened, threatening to swallow their relationship whole. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned away, his mind already racing with thoughts of how to find Amara and Obi, to ensure their safety despite the peril his mother's actions had placed them in. With that, Chima stormed out of the palace, his anger and determination propelling him forward. He instructed one of the guards to prepare a car immediately, the urgency in his voice leaving no room for delay. The guard, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly complied. Chima drove through the narrow, winding roads that connected the villages around his kingdom. Each village he passed through bore the same response. No one had seen Amara or Obi. He described her to anyone who would listen. Market vendors, farmers, elders sitting by the roadside. But every inquiry was met with a shake of the head or a sympathetic look. As the hours ticked by, the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. Chima's frustration grew with each unanswered question, each moment of fruitless searching. The fear of what might have happened to Amara gnawed at him, creating a tight knot in his stomach. The villages became quieter as the evening set in, and the bustling activity of the day gave way to the calm of the night. Chima pulled over to the side of the road, stepping out of the car. The cool evening breeze did little to soothe his frayed nerves. He stood there, looking out at the horizon, where the last traces of sunlight were fading, giving way to the soft, twinkling lights of the stars. The vastness of the sky above seemed to mock his sense of helplessness. He ran his hands through his hair, the weight of his responsibility and guilt pressing heavily on his shoulders. The image of Amara, vulnerable and alone, haunted him. He could almost hear her voice, feel her presence, and the thought that she might be scared or hurt somewhere out there was unbearable. He had to find her. He needed to ensure she was safe. Chima climbed back into the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound in the quiet night. He drove on, his eyes scanning every shadow, every figure, hoping against hope for a sign of her. He passed through another village, stopping at a small cluster of huts. He asked a group of women gathered around a fire if they had seen a young woman matching Amara's description. They shook their heads, murmuring words of sympathy and concern. As the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, Chima felt a wave of despair. He parked the car and stepped out once more, standing alone in the dimming light. The enormity of the task ahead seemed insurmountable, but he knew he couldn't give up. His love for Amara, and the guilt that weighed on his heart, drove him onward. He had to make things right, to find her and protect her no matter the cost. The night deepened, the the stars above twinkling brightly against the dark canvas of the sky. Chima's resolve hardened with each passing moment. He would search every village, every corner of the land if he had to. With a deep breath, he climbed back into the car, the determination in his eyes reflecting the vow he made to himself. He would find Amara and bring her back, safe and sound. Nothing else mattered. The next day, Amara and Obi began their search for a place to live in the new village. They asked around. Their inquiries met with mixed reactions of sympathy and curiosity. It wasn't long before they found a small, vacant house. Amara, determined to secure a roof over their heads, went to the village chief to ask for permission to occupy the house. In front of the chief, Amara negotiated with a member of the family who owned the house. She offered to pay rent, ensuring the family would benefit financially. The agreement was reached, and they were granted permission to move in. Amara felt a surge of optimism. The most critical task, finding a place to live, had been accomplished. She now turned her attention to their next challenge: earning a living. She inquired about the village market, where she could sell her items, just as she had done in Umwofia. Amara's bubbly personality served her well. She adapted quickly, her resilience shining through even in the face of adversity. By the end of the day, she had already gathered information about the market and potential customers. Obi, observing her swift adaptation, couldn't help but express his surprise. "How can you move on so quickly from Umwofia?" Obi asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "You had already built a life there." Amara sighed deeply, her eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and pain. "I haven't moved on, Obi. I'm just trying to make the best of this situation. I cried the whole way here last night, and yesterday I cried the whole day. But I can't cry forever. I have to move on so I can make a better life for us. You need to go to school or start your own business, and we need money for that. If I just sit around and cry for Chima, that won't happen. Yes, I'm hurt, but I've been through worse than a heartbreak. I was betrayed and sold by our mother, Obi. Nothing will break me more than what that woman did to me." Obi's face changed as he recalled the painful details of their mother's betrayal. He nodded in agreement, understanding the depth of Amara's strength and resolve. Despite their modest surroundings, Amara and Obi began the task of turning their new house into a home. They cleaned every corner, transforming the space from a neglected dwelling into a place of warmth and comfort. They had left behind most of their belongings in Umwofia, unable to carry much when they were banished in the middle of the night. The palace guards had not provided them with transport, leaving them to carry only their clothes and a few pots for cooking. Their new home, though sparse, became a symbol of their resilience. Amara and Obi knew they had to start from scratch. As they scrubbed floors and arranged their few possessions, they found solace in each other's company and the shared goal of rebuilding their lives. Amara's mind buzzed with plans for the future. She envisioned setting up a stall in the market, selling her goods, and gradually earning enough to expand. She thought about Obi's education or the possibility of him starting his own business. Despite the uncertainty, Amara's resolve was unwavering. She had faced unimaginable hardships before and emerged stronger each time. This was just another chapter in their story, one that she was determined to write with hope and resilience. Obi, inspired by his sister's strength, resolved to support her in every way he could. Together, they faced the future with a mixture of fear and hope, ready to rebuild their lives from the ground up. Chima had been struggling to find Amara, and his family started to see that he was growing distant. Princess Nena, too, noticed that her fiancé was withdrawing. Although she knew about Amara, she didn't want Chima to know that she was aware of his feelings for another woman. Nena was unfazed by Chima's love for Amara because she was determined not to let Amara come between her and her future. Chima had been promised to her a long time ago, and she wasn't going to let a commoner disrupt her plans. Princess Nena decided it was time to expedite the wedding. She realized that Chima kept stalling and had been avoiding setting a date, so she went to his parents, hoping they would persuade him to commit. "Mama, Papa," she began, her voice soft and pleading. "I feel like Chima is slipping away from me. Does he not want to marry me anymore?" She feigned sadness, her eyes welling with tears. The king and queen exchanged glances, a mix of concern and confusion crossing their faces. The queen spoke first, her tone reassuring and authoritative. "Nena, there is no such thing. Chima will marry you. He has been busy with royal duties, which is why he hasn't been pushing for a date." Nena, sensing an opportunity, pressed on, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. "But we need to set a date, or better yet, you should set the date of the wedding since Chima is dragging his feet." The king leaned back in his chair, considering her words. The queen, more decisive, nodded in agreement. "You are right, Nena. It is time we set the date. Chima has been preoccupied, and it's clear he needs a little push." Princess Nena allowed herself a small smile, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Thank you, Mama, Papa. This means so much to me. I want to ensure that everything is perfect for the wedding." The queen stood up, her decision final. "We will announce the date to Chima when he returns. This matter needs to be settled, and a clear plan will help him focus." Nena's heart raced with satisfaction. She knew that with the wedding date set, Chima would have no choice but to comply. The promise made to her so many years ago would be fulfilled, and the future she envisioned would finally come to fruition. The idea appealed to Chima's parents. Later, when Chima returned, they shared the news with him. "Chima," his mother announced with an air of finality, "we have decided that the wedding will be next month. This gives us enough time to prepare." Chima's face flushed with anger. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice calm. "Why would you do that?" he asked, the tension in his voice barely concealed. "I have the ability to choose when I get married." The queen dismissed his objections with a wave of her hand. "Oh, Chima, please don't act like you haven't been dragging your feet. Even Princess Nena came to us with concerns. She thought you two would be married by now." Chima's irritation grew, his frustration evident. What is she even still doing here? She was supposed to stay a week and then go to her father's house. It's because she has been here too long that she thinks she is already my wife. She needs to leave and go back to her father's house and wait until the wedding. The king, his patience wearing thin, snapped, "Chima, stop this nonsense. You and the princess are getting married next month, and that is final." Chima's eyes blazed with anger. "Father, this is not fair. I deserve to have a say in when I get married. This is my life we are talking about." His mother, her tone softer but still firm, interjected, "Chima, we understand your concerns, but Nena has been waiting patiently. You must understand the pressure we face to see you settled and the future of this kingdom secured." Chima clenched his fists, trying to contain his frustration. "It's not about Nena waiting or the kingdom. It's about my feelings, my choice. I haven't even had time to process everything that's happening." The queen stepped closer to her son, placing a hand on his arm. "Chima, we know you have been under a lot of stress, but this decision is for the best. Nena is a good match for you. She understands the responsibilities that come with being by your side." Chima pulled away, his voice rising slightly. "Responsibilities? What about love, mother? What about what I want?" The king, standing tall and imposing, responded sternly. "You have a duty to this family and this kingdom, Chima. Personal desires must sometimes be set aside for the greater good. This marriage is not just about you. It's about our legacy, our future." Chima felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He knew arguing further would be futile. His parents had made up their minds, and in their eyes, the matter was settled. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "Very well," he said, his voice filled with resignation. "I will marry Nena next month, but know that I do this out of duty, not desire." The queen sighed, a mix of relief and sadness in her eyes. "Thank you, Chima. One day, you will understand why this was necessary." Furious, Chima stormed off to his room. His footsteps echoed through the corridors, each one heavier than the last. The door to his chambers swung open with a force that made it clear to anyone within earshot that the prince was deeply troubled. Inside, he found his friend Afani waiting for him, a look of concern already etched on his face. "What's wrong?" Afani asked, his eyes scanning Chima's distressed expression. Chima's shoulders slumped as he threw himself onto a chair. "They have set the wedding date," he replied, his voice filled with frustration and despair. "Next month." Afani's face softened with sympathy. He knew how much Chima was struggling. "Have you found Amara?" he asked gently, hoping to divert Chima's mind, even if just momentarily. Chima shook his head, his sadness palpable. "I searched and did not find her," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "How can someone just disappear like that? It doesn't make sense, Ifani. She walked to where she was going, so how is it that no one knows where she is? I can't even take the guards to help me because my parents will know what I am doing." Ifani sighed, trying to offer his friend some perspective. "Chima, maybe it is time you let her go," he suggested softly. "Maybe this is a sign that you should focus on Princess Nena. She is a beautiful woman who loves you and will make a good wife." Chima looked up at his friend, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "But I love Amara, Ifani," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've tried to stop thinking about her. I've tried to let her go, but my heart is not cooperating. Now that I don't know where she is, it's even worse. If she were still here and I could see her, it would be better. But the fact that I don't know if she is okay and safe is driving me crazy. I can't sleep and I can't eat, Ifani. I just want to know that she is okay." Ifani, seeing his friend's heartbreak, struggled to find the right words. He knew how deeply Chima cared for Amara, and it pained him to see his friend in such turmoil. "I understand, Chima," he said finally, placing a reassuring hand on Chima's shoulder. "Your feelings are valid, and I can see how much this is hurting you. But you must also think about what is within your control." Chima sighed deeply, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. "I know, Ifani," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like everything is slipping away from me. My parents don't understand. They see this marriage as a duty, a responsibility, but for me, it's more than that. It's my life." Ifani nodded, his heart aching for his friend. "It's a difficult situation, Chima, but maybe finding some closure with Amara could help you. Even if you can't be with her, knowing that she is safe might give you the peace of mind you need to move forward." Chima looked at Ifani, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You're right," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I need to find Amara. I need to know that she is safe. Only then can I begin to make sense of everything else." Princess Nena sat in her room, her mind racing. She had overheard Chima's harsh words to his parents, demanding that she leave and return to her father's house. The realization that Chima wanted her gone struck fear deep within her. She couldn't afford to lose him, not when she was so close to becoming the next queen of Umwofia. She knew she had to act quickly and decisively. Steeling herself, she went to Chima's parents and feigned a cheerful demeanor. "Mama, Papa," she began. "I am going to visit my parents to inform them that I will be coming back soon to finalize the wedding preparations." The king and queen nodded approvingly, unaware of her true intentions. With a determined stride, Princess Nena left the palace and made her way to a secluded part of the village where a witch doctor resided. This witch doctor was known for her potent concoctions and dark magic. Nena explained her situation, her voice trembling slightly as she requested something that would make Chima disoriented. The witch doctor handed her a small packet of powder, assuring her that it was tasteless and would go undetected. Nena paid her handsomely and hurried back to the palace, her heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Upon her return, she mixed the powder into a drink for Chima. She hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling as she stirred the concoction. To be certain, she tasted the drink herself, finding no trace of the powder's presence. Satisfied, she proceeded to Chima's chambers, where she found him deep in thought, his brow furrowed with worry. "Chima," she said softly, her voice laced with false concern. "Can we talk?" He looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance, but nodded. She handed him the drink, watching intently as he took a sip. "I want to apologize for going to your parents," Nena began, her tone contrite. "I didn't mean to create trouble. I just thought it was time for us to set a date." Chima, believing her to be genuine, accepted her apology. "I understand why you wanted to move things along," he said. "You deserve to know where you stand. Any man would be lucky to have you." As they talked, Nena kept a close eye on Chima, ensuring he drank every last drop. Soon, he began to feel disoriented, his vision blurring and his head spinning. "What's happening to me?" he murmured, confusion etched on his face. Nena feigned concern. "You must be tired, Chima. You should rest. You'll feel better tomorrow." The next morning, Chima woke up with a pounding headache. He groaned, rubbing his temples, and then froze. Princess Nena was lying next to him in his bed. Panic surged through him as he tried to piece together the events of the previous night. He remembered talking to Nena, but everything after that was a blur. "Nena, what are you doing in my room?" he demanded, his voice thick with confusion and dread. Nena stretched and pretended to wake up, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. "You made me a woman last night, Chima," she said softly. Chima's heart sank. "What? How did we end up together?" Nena's face twisted into a mask of hurt. "I feel so disrespected. Chima, you took my pride and deflowered me, and now you're acting like you don't remember? Last night was beautiful and we created something special. Now we just need to plan our wedding." Chima's mind reeled. He felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. "You need to leave," he said, his voice strained. "If our parents catch you here, we'll be in trouble." Nena dressed quickly, a satisfied smirk hidden from Chima's view. She tiptoed out of his room, leaving Chima alone with his turmoil. Chima sat on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. The pain in his chest was almost unbearable. He had promised himself that the next woman he would be intimate with would be Amara. Now that promise lay shattered. He had never felt so lost or betrayed, not just by Nena but by his own actions. He couldn't remember what had happened, but he knew the implications were grave. He thought of Amara, the woman he truly loved, and felt a wave of guilt crash over him. He had hoped to find a way out of the marriage to Nena, but now, having deflowered her, he knew there was no escape. His heart ached at the thought of being bound to Nena, a woman he did not love, while the memory of Amara haunted his every moment. Tears of frustration and sorrow filled his eyes as he realized how hopeless his situation had become. With a heavy heart, Chima decided to do the only thing that brought him happiness: look for Amara. He knew seeing her would lift him out of the black hole he had suddenly found himself in. This time, he looked harder, and because Amara was a businesswoman, he opted not to search for her in the villages but instead at the village markets. He combed through several markets until he ventured to another market in a neighboring village. From a distance, he saw Amara's bubbly personality and beautiful smile as she interacted with a customer. Relief washed over him when he saw that she was healthy and unharmed. However, he also felt a pang of sadness seeing her smiling and doing well without him. He watched her for a while, experiencing a joy he couldn't express. "This woman will be the death of me," he muttered to himself. She had such a hold on him that he couldn't understand, and he knew he loved her deeply. Gathering his courage, he approached her stall. Amara saw him coming and was shocked at first, not quite believing it was really him. The past months had shown her that she didn't know Chima as well as she thought she did, so she was certain she might be mistaking someone else for him. Why would he be here when he was the one who had banished her? An anger rose within her as he drew closer, and she realized it was truly him. But she maintained her glowing smile for her customers, not wanting them to see her anger. Chima stood by her stall, waiting until she finished with a customer. Once the customer left, he greeted Amara with a smile. Amara, clearly angry, responded, "What are you doing here?" "Chima, if it wasn't because I'm new to this market, I would be throwing stones at you right now. I am only composing myself out of respect for these people, and I don't want to lose this stall because of you." Chima, taken aback by her harsh words, asked, "Why are you asking why I'm here? I came to look for you. Why would you be looking for me when you sent guards to throw me out of my own home in the middle of the night?" "Chima, why would you?" Amara said with anger, trying to keep her voice low so she wouldn't cause a scene. Chima, trying to keep his composure, responded, "I didn't send the guards. My parents are the ones who banished you. I didn't know until the next day, and I've been looking for you ever since." Amara remained quiet for a while as if thinking. Eventually, she asked, "Why would your parents want to banish me? Chima, what did I do?" Chima explained, feeling almost embarrassed. "They found out that I had been sending a guard to keep an eye on you." Amara then asked, "What are you doing here? From what I know, you had stopped talking to me and didn't want to see me anymore." Chima stayed quiet for a moment, struggling to find the right words. Eventually, he said, "I was worried about you and wanted to make sure you were okay." Amara began packing her stall items. Chima, seeing her pace, started helping her. Once they were done packing, she carried her stuff and Chima insisted on helping her. They walked in silence, Chima stealing glances at Amara, not knowing what she was thinking. She clearly wasn't happy to see him. Unable to bear the silence any longer, Chima asked, "Why are you so silent?" Amara responded, "Because I still don't understand what you want and why you're here." They finally reached Amara's home and put her items inside. Chima looked around, noticing how much simpler her new home was compared to the one she had built for herself in their village. It was clear she had recently moved in because there wasn't much in the house. Amara turned to him and said, "I'm sure you can see what your parents did to me and how they've ruined the life I built for myself. I had accepted that you no longer wanted me, Chima, and I stayed away from you. But you still couldn't bear seeing me happy. Could you? You sent guards to keep an eye on me, and now I've been banished because of you. I worked so hard to build that house, and now I've lost it because of you." Chima, feeling ashamed, stayed silent. Amara continued, her voice filled with pain. "I was doing fine before I met you. I didn't fall in love with anyone and had no attachments. Life was good. But then you came along and ruined things. You made me fall in love with you, and then you disappeared. Chima, you didn't say anything or try to explain why. Why did you make me fall in love with you? Why did you watch me fall so hard for you when you knew you were gonna leave? I was better off without this falling in love nonsense. And here I didn't have to see you. I was finally gonna piece my life together. Yes, it's painful that I can't have you, but here is where I was going to rebuild my life and hopefully get over you. But then you had to come and look for me because clearly, you can't stand seeing me happy, Chima." Her voice rose as she spoke, her emotions pouring out. Chima stayed quiet for a moment, then finally said, "That's because I love you, Amara. Can't you see that? Can't you see what you do to me and how hard it has been for me to stay away from you? I can't stop thinking about you. Trust me, I've tried, but I can't. I'm here and I'm not sure what I'm doing here. But here I am because the hold you have on me is something no one else has ever had. I'm caught between my identity, my family, and my heart. I always knew I was meant to marry Princess Nena, even before I met you. Trust me, I didn't plan to fall for you. I knew you were trouble the moment I met you, and I should have stayed away, but I couldn't. I fell deeply, and now I'm in too deep, and I don't know what to do." Amara could hear the frustration in his voice and saw the tears that threatened to fall. She then hugged him and said, "Oh, Chima, what are we going to do?" They remained in that position for a while as Chima's tears fell. It was the first time Amara saw Chima this vulnerable, and that made her see that he was indeed in a difficult position. Amara then let him go and made him food. Chima asked about Obi, and Amara proudly said that Obi was at school, learning about business so he could help her expand her business and eventually have his own. She told him that because the school was far, Obi usually came back late, which is why he wasn't home yet. She spoke with pride, and Chima could see how proud she was of her brother. They ate together and laughed, momentarily forgetting about their troubles. Later, Amara, feeling tired, decided to have an early night and asked Chima to leave because she needed to rest. She told him she had to rise early the next day because she had closed early to avoid kicking him in front of all those people, and she wanted to do that in the comfort of her own home. Chima laughed at her comment and said, "I'm not going anywhere, Amara. I'll be sleeping here tonight." Amara, thinking he was joking, stood up and told Chima to close the door after he left. She proceeded to go and take a bath. She was shocked when Chima came into the room and got into the bathtub with her. He did so in silence, and Amara was too shocked to say anything. They took a bath in silence, helping each other wash up. Once they finished, they went to her bedroom and got into bed. They cuddled, basking in the moment of being in each other's company. It was the first time they spent the night together, and they spent it talking, sharing their thoughts and feelings until dawn. It was magical, and their first night together felt unreal. They talked about everything, rekindling the closeness they had once shared. Obi came in later that night. He heard her laughing and talking and was shocked to hear Chima was in the house when he knocked on his sister's door. In the morning, Chima found Obi in the kitchen and apologized to him for cutting all ties. He tried to make him understand the position he was in. Obi, knowing Chima was a good man, understood and left for school after saying goodbye to his sister. Now alone in the house, Amara looked at Chima and said, "You need to be a man and fight for our love, Chima. There's no other way. I'm here waiting, and I'll run away with you if that's what it takes." Chima's head fell. He looked at Amara and said, "I can't, Amara. It's my duty to the throne to marry her." Amara, hurt and with tears silently falling, said, "Go, Chima." Chima went on his knees, begging Amara to understand. Amara then said, "I won't be able to understand unless you make me understand. Chima, why can't you be with me? Why can't you leave this princess who is clearly not making you happy?" Chima replied, "It is my duty, Amara. I am expected to do this. I have known since I was young that I am supposed to marry her. It is an agreement between our two families, and I am expected to hold my end of the agreement. Amara, please understand." Amara, still sobbing, said, "I understand, Chima, which is why I'm asking you to leave. I'm setting you free so you can do your royal duty. I understand you're in a difficult position, and since you're royalty, you have more responsibilities than us common folk. It's because I understand that I'm letting you go." Chima, feeling hopeless, said, "I know you feel like I could get out of this if I wanted to, but I can't, Amara. I honestly wish I could, but I can't." Amara turned her back on him. Chima, with a broken heart, turned to leave. He stood outside the door, listening to Amara sobbing. A single tear fell, and he walked away, feeling broken and sad. If only things were as simple. Chima's thoughts drifted back to the origins of his predicament. Years ago, his family had been in a dire financial situation. They were on the brink of losing everything: their land, their home, and their status. The debts had piled up, and it seemed there was no way out. They had borrowed money from his uncle, and when his parents couldn't pay it back, his uncle saw this as an opportunity to take the throne. He threatened to take the throne from Chima's father for the money owed. Chima's uncle was an evil man, and his parents couldn't let him gain that power. To keep his uncle from getting the throne, they asked Princess Nena's family for help. Nena's family provided the financial support that saved Chima's family from ruin. But the help came with a condition, a promise that Chima would marry Nena when they both came of age. This agreement was made when Chima was still a boy, too young to understand the implications fully. As he grew older, the weight of this promise became heavier. Chima knew his family owed a great debt to Nena's family. It wasn't just a matter of money. It was about honor and loyalty. The marriage was not just a repayment of the financial debt, but also a way to solidify the bond between the two families. His parents reminded him often of the sacrifice Nena's family made for them. Without their intervention, his family would have been destitute, and his uncle would have taken the throne. Years passed, and the financial situation of Chima's family improved. They worked hard and eventually amassed enough wealth to pay off the debt. Chima, seeing a glimmer of hope, suggested to his parents that they repay the money and annul the marriage agreement. However, his parents insisted that the promise was not just about money, it was about honor. The deal had been made, and backing out would bring shame upon both families. It would break the trust that had been built over the years. His parents believed that keeping this promise was a way to show their gratitude and uphold their honor. Chima felt trapped. He was torn between his duty to his family and his love for Amara. Every time he thought about breaking off the engagement, he remembered the stories his parents told him about the difficult times and how Nena's family had been their saviors. He felt a profound sense of obligation to fulfill his promise, even though it meant sacrificing his own happiness. And now that he had deflowered Nena and made her a woman, this made it particularly hard because that means now he has to marry her. Driving back to his village, Chima's mind was a whirlpool of emotions. He remembered the day he first met Amara, her radiant smile, and the way she laughed. He hadn't planned to fall in love with her. In fact, he had tried to keep his distance, knowing the complications it would bring. But Amara's spirit was irresistible. He fell for her deeply, despite knowing the consequences. As he drove, he reflected on the times they spent together, the moments of joy and laughter. He thought about how Amara had built her life, her business, and how proud she was of her brother, Obi. Chima felt a deep pang of guilt, knowing that his love had brought her so much pain. By the time he reached his village, Chima was emotionally exhausted. He parked his car and sat there for a moment, staring blankly ahead. The weight of his responsibilities felt crushing. He had to honor his family's debt, but in doing so, he had to give up the woman he truly loved. The love that could never be had left a void in his heart, one that he feared would never be filled. Chima knew he had to face his parents, to continue the charade of preparing for his marriage to Nena. But in his heart, he knew he would always carry the love he had for Amara, a love that would remain a beautiful yet painful memory. As he walked into his home, he felt the full weight of his predicament, caught between duty and love, honor and happiness. The pain of this conflict was a burden he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. Chima arrived at the palace to find Princess Nena preparing to leave. His parents, clearly upset, confronted him about his absence the previous night. They could see that something was deeply troubling their son, but he remained silent. The king and queen assured Nena that they would speak with Chima, then asked him to accompany her to the car. As they walked together, Chima told her he would see her soon to continue preparations for their wedding. With that, he turned away and left, feeling a heavy burden on his heart. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere in the palace remained tense. One day, news arrived that Nena's parents would be visiting. When they arrived with Nena, her father was visibly furious. He confronted Chima's parents, accusing them of failing to protect his daughter. The king and queen were bewildered, asking what he meant. The revelation that Nena was pregnant left them in shock. "She's pregnant? When did this happen, Nena?" they asked in disbelief. With her head bowed, Nena confessed, "The night before I left." Chima's parents, speechless, summoned Chima. When he appeared with Afani, he was puzzled by the scene before him. He had been diligently working on the wedding preparations and had no idea why Nena's father was so enraged. He greeted everyone, and his parents immediately demanded an explanation. "What did you do to Nena?" Confused, Chima replied, "I don't understand." His mother, trying to contain her disappointment, said, "You can't say you don't understand. Nena is pregnant. Couldn't you have waited until your wedding? Your wedding is next month. You have brought shame upon our families." Chima, feeling the weight of their disappointment, remained silent for a moment before apologizing. His mother attempted to defuse the situation by suggesting that Nena would stay at the palace until the wedding, ensuring she was well cared for during her first pregnancy. Nena's father still looked furious, but Nena intervened. "Father, at least it is with the man I love. I have seen Chima with children, and he is amazing. He will make an amazing father," she said, trying to smile despite the tension. Chima and Ifani stood there, listening. Ifani visibly felt uncomfortable, sensing the gravity of the situation. Chima's heart pounded in his chest. The guilt and confusion from that night with Nena came rushing back. He had tried to forget the disorientation, the regret, but now it was all too real. The shame of his actions weighed heavily on him. He had been desperate to see Amara, to find some solace, but instead, he had entangled himself even further in obligations he wished he could escape. His parents, caught between their disappointment and the need to maintain honor, struggled to find the right words. His mother, ever the peacemaker, said, "At least you will be married soon. We will take care of Nena and ensure everything goes smoothly." Nena's father, though still furious, seemed slightly mollified by this. "Very well. But know this, Chima. My daughter's happiness and well-being are paramount. You better not fail her." Chima nodded, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down harder than ever. He glanced at Ifani, who looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Chima knew his friend was uncomfortable with the situation, and he felt a pang of guilt for dragging him into this mess. The week leading up to his wedding was torment for Chima. Despite his attempts to stay away from Amara, he found himself drawn to her, unable to resist the magnetic pull of his love for her. The day before his wedding, Amara met him with a resolute expression, the weight of their situation evident in her eyes. "Chima, I cannot continue to hurt myself like this anymore," Amara began, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "I would have even agreed to be your first or second wife, but it's clear that you and I cannot be. I'm asking you to no longer come to my house. We should no longer see each other at all." Chima felt his heart shatter at her words, but he understood her pain and nodded in agreement. He returned to the palace, feeling like his world was collapsing. He stayed in his room, consumed by a sense of loss and helplessness. For the first time in his life, he wished he wasn't royalty. Chima had considered taking Amara as a second wife, but Nena had made it clear she would not tolerate sharing him with another woman. Whether Nena knew about Amara or not was unclear, but her hints about not sharing him were unmistakable. Chima knew that his parents would acquiesce to anything Nena's family demanded. As Chima brooded in his room, Ifani entered, ready to celebrate the beginning of his friend's new life. He praised Chima, telling him he would make a great father and be a good man. Grateful for his friend's support, Chima confided in Ifani about Amara's decision to end things. Ifani tried to console him. "Amara will forgive you in time, my friend. You could always cheat on Nena with Amara. That way everyone wins. Your parents' debt is paid, and you get to be with the woman you love." Chima laughed. "I wish I could, but if I go to Amara's house and lay with her, I'll never come back to this palace. I'm not wayward like you, Ifani. I stick to one woman. Sometimes I'm ready to let everything go and live like a poor man. But my uncle is a cruel man. If my family loses this throne, it will go to him, and he'll starve the people of Umwofia and make them pay for everything." Ifani laughed. "Don't remind me of that man." He's so greedy he'd make you pay for your own ears for using them to listen to him." They both laughed, easing the tension for a moment. The next day, the wedding took place. It seemed like a joyous celebration for everyone else, but to Chima, it was all a blur. He drank heavily to get through the ceremony. Nena officially moved into the palace, and Chima, unable to stay away, asked one of the guards to keep an eye on Amara. Nena's pregnancy progressed well, and she glowed with the radiance of impending motherhood. Chima, resigned to his fate, tried to be a good husband to her. Nena reveled in her status as the next queen and eagerly awaited the birth of her child to solidify her place in the palace. She knew Chima still loved Amara. She saw it in his eyes, but she told herself it didn't matter. Empires weren't built on love, and in time, Chima would see that she was the woman for him. Months went by, and the time for Nena to give birth arrived. Chima had been very supportive, ensuring she had everything she needed. The palace staff attended to her every whim, and she lived like the queen she was destined to be. On the day of the birth, the royal midwives, who had been responsible for the births of the royal family for generations, came to prepare Nena. Chima waited outside the birthing room, anxiety gnawing at him as he listened to Nena's cries of pain. He felt a pang of guilt and helplessness, wishing he could be there to comfort her. Despite the complexity of their relationship, he had grown accustomed to the idea of being a father and was determined to make the best of their marriage. Finally, the cries of a newborn pierced the air, followed by joyous celebrations from within the room. Chima was summoned inside, and he saw his son for the first time. A surge of pride filled him, and though he would have been just as content with a daughter, he promised himself to raise his son better than his parents had raised him. In the days following the birth, Ifani visited frequently, eager to see the new baby. Chima spent his days caring for the child, allowing Nena to rest. He had put his royal duties on hold to bond with his son and support Nena. As custom required, the royal healer came to check on the baby and perform rituals to strengthen him. Upon examining the child, the healer shook her head, a look of concern etched on her face. Chima's parents, puzzled, asked why she was reacting this way. "This is not a child of the family," the healer said firmly. Nena's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" she stammered. The healer, irritated, replied, "I have been doing this all my life. I know the children of the Okafor royal bloodline, and this child does not belong here." The queen and king looked at the healer with concern but knew she was loyal and had never lied to them. The queen approached the child, examining him closely. She saw none of the distinct marks of the Okafor lineage. Turning to Nena, her eyes wide with realization, she demanded, "Whose child is this?" Nena, her voice shaking, insisted, "This is Chima's child." The healer scoffed. "Young lady, I know what I see. This child does not carry the Okafor blood." The queen, her patience waning, said, "We can use modern methods to prove this. If you don't tell us the truth, I will call your parents so we can go with them to the hospital and prove this. We will find out that way. I am confident that our African way of seeing whether this child belongs to this family is accurate, but if you still want us to go the Western way, then we will. But I must let you know that this will mean your father will hear the news of the child's paternity, and I know he would have defended you up until that point, but that will make him angry. Your father does not take kindly to being deceived. You know that very well." Nena, realizing she was cornered, whispered, "Ifani." Chima roared, "Speak up so everyone can hear you." Nena, tears streaming down her face, confessed, "Ifani is the father." Silence fell over the room as everyone processed this revelation. They quickly searched for Ifani, who had been in the room but had slipped away unnoticed. He had gone to his quarters to pack and was on his way to his car when Chima asked the guards to go look for him, and they got him just in time when he was heading to his car to leave. The guards brought Ifani back to the room. The king, barely containing his fury, demanded, "Nena, Repeat what you just told us. Nena said, Ifani is the father of my child. Ifani started denying and saying, Stop lying, Nena. Tell these people who the father of your child is and stop trying to frame me. Chima's father asked him, If this was not the truth, then why were you running? Ifani kept quiet. Chima's mother asked, When did this happen? Why did you say my son was the father? Nena, trembling, explained, It has been going on for a while. Before I even came here, I felt pregnant while I was here. When I found out, I told Ifani and suggested we marry since Chima was in love with Amara. But he refused and gave me the plan to pin it on Chima. I went to a witch doctor and she gave me something. I drugged Chima and made him drink until he was drunk so I could blame it on him. Chima, his face a mask of anger and betrayal, asked, Nothing happened between us? Nena answered, No, nothing happened. You kept talking about Amara the whole time you were drunk. Chima said, That's why I couldn't remember what happened that night. You made me feel guilty for not remembering. And you, Ifani, how could you do this to me? You knew how hard it was for me to marry this girl. I lost the woman I love, and you watched me suffer while you knew the truth. Ifani, you are like a brother to me. In fact, you are my brother. But you watched me suffer. You watched me die slowly inside while you knew you could get me out of this. What have I done to you that you would watch me suffer and not do anything? Ifani responded to Chima, Don't act like a saint. Chima, you were willing to prostitute yourself to this woman all so you can save the throne. You think you are better than me, I see. I was interested in Amara and you told me to leave her alone and I did that, so this was payback for that. Not everything should be about you, Chima. I should be able to live my life. And why are you complaining because you don't even love Nena? Chima was stunned. So you are angry because I told you to not see Amara. You do not even love Amara, and you know why I asked. I was honest with you, and if you were not comfortable, you could have told me that you have already fallen for her. You have done this before. You have gone behind my back and laid with the woman I loved before, and I forgave you. But now I see that you did not make a mistake. You did that intentionally, and you will continue doing this. Ifani answered, It does not matter whether I loved her or not. The point is you were selfish, and you wanted me to leave a woman you could not have. Chima, getting angrier, said, You do not love Amara, Ifani, and now you want to tell me that it does not matter that you do not love her. What nonsense is that, Ifani? You are selfish, and if you don't see how much you broke me, then I don't even know what to say to you. Both of you cost me my happiness. You cost me the only woman I have ever fallen in love with in this world. Well, Mama and Papa, I hope you are happy now. The woman you wanted me to marry so badly drugged me and pinned a child on me. She allowed me to bond with a child when she knew that it is not mine. I lost the woman I love, and it was not even worth it. Ifani responded, Oh, please. She is not even all that. The woman you are talking about slept with every man in the village. You are acting like you are talking about a virgin. Chima was getting angrier, and as he was charging at Ifani, the guards held him so he would not fight Ifani. Chima's mother then asked, So when you said you are in love, you were talking about Adanna, Chima. But why are you calling her Amara now? I hope you are not talking about Adanna because you are not going to marry that woman. You better forget about it. Then Chima looked at her and said sadly, Mama, that is my choice, and this time I will marry whoever I choose. You tried to protect your image and you failed, so let me be. The king, glaring at Ifani, said, I warned you that your promiscuity would get you into trouble one day. The queen said to Ifani, I never want to see you here again. And you, Chima, you must know that you are not going to marry that woman, and my decision is final. Chima looked at her and said, We shall see, mother. Ifani, consumed by shame, wished the ground would swallow him. The king ordered Nena and Ifani to remain in the palace while they called Nena's parents. Nena's parents were called and informed of what had transpired. Chima, looking them in the eye, said, We kept our end of the deal and your daughter broke it. I want out. Nena's father protested. You can't do that. What will people say? What will I tell them? This will bring shame to our family and kingdom. Chima, resolute, replied, the shame is already here. Your daughter and Afani have dishonored us. I cannot stay in a marriage built on lies. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. The king and queen, though angry and disappointed, understood Chima's decision. The deceit had tainted the alliance, and the repercussions would be felt by all involved. Chima said, give me time and I will think of how to resolve this. But in the meantime, excuse me. Since I have just gained my freedom, I am going to celebrate. And he left. He got into his car and drove straight to the market where Amara sold her goods. As soon as he saw her, he ran with pure joy and lifted her up in celebration. Amara, not knowing what was going on, asked Chima to put her down. She looked at him as if he were crazy and asked, what are you so excited about? Chima, beaming with happiness, said, I have finally been set free. I am going to be a free man, and I can finally be with you. Amara looked at him and said, finally be with who? She started packing her stuff. I hate the fact that you always come at a bad time. You always come when you know I am working, and now I have to pack up so I don't embarrass you in front of all these people. Now, I will lose money because you decided to be stupid, Chima. Chima listened while helping her pack, and they walked to her house. Frustrated, Amara finally said, so, what do you want me to do with this information? Chima? Chima, puzzled, said, what do you mean, Amara? This is good news for us. We can finally be together. Amara looked at him and said, so, you think I have been waiting for you all these months? Chima, you think I have been waiting for you to come back? A year has passed since I last saw you, and you think I waited for you to eventually get a get-out-of-jail-free card? Well, I was not waiting, Chima, and I have moved on. Chima looked at her and said, Amara, I had someone watching you, so I know you have been single all this while. Amara said, the fact that I am single does not mean I have not moved on. I have moved on, and I would like for you to leave. Chima looked at Amara, waiting for her to say something else. He could not believe that she looked at him and waited for him to leave. Chima said, I am not leaving, Amara. I am not losing you again. Amara looked at him and said, you lost me, Chima. I cannot be with a weak man who does not stand for our love. What will happen should you have to take another wife or your family requires you to do something? You could not fight for us, and now you want me to welcome you with open arms? Well, I will not do that, Chima. Chima went on his knees and said, Amara, please forgive me. I promise from this day I will be yours fully, and you can do whatever you want with me. I had to marry her because my family owed her family. If I had not married her, my family would have lost the throne because they owed my uncle, and he had told them if they did not pay the debt, he would take the throne. My parents could not risk that and asked for help from Nena's parents, and they agreed that I would marry Nena as repayment, so I had no choice. You know how greedy and evil my uncle is, and if my parents lost the throne to him, the people of Umwofia would suffer. Amara said, why did you not tell me all this then? Because if you had, we would not be in this situation. You did not trust me enough with the truth, and in turn, you cost us our love, Chima. Chima, with tears streaming down his face, said, please don't say this, Amara. We can't be over. He then went to the door and locked it, saying, we are going to remain in this house and talk about this until you forgive me because I am not going back to being miserable again. They sat down in silence for a while and went to bed without saying anything. Obi returned later and sensed the tension. The next day, Chima still refused to leave. He said to Amara, who had been quiet this whole time, I will leave the throne if that is what it takes to get you back. I will leave and come back to live here with you. I will leave it all behind, Amara, if that is what it will take for us to work it out. Amara came and hugged him, saying, you better be glad I love you. Chima, without saying a word, let his tears fall. He had not even realized how painful being away from Amara was until his tears fell freely, and Amara let him cry. Once he was calm, he said, "I am leaving, but I will come back to get you, and you will be my wife, Amara. I promise that you will be my wife." A few days later, Chima returned to the palace and called for a meeting with his parents. He explained everything that had happened and told them about his decision. They were initially shocked and disappointed, but Chima's resolve and honesty convinced them to support his choice. Chima abdicated his position and, with his parents' blessings, went back to Amara. This time, he came not as a prince, but as a man determined to build a life with the woman he truly loved. Amara welcomed him with open arms, and they began their life together, free from the constraints of royalty. He no longer cared what anyone said because this was the woman he chose, and he will choose her each and every day when he wakes up.